We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Are electric vehicles all they've cracked up to be, and do they fulfill the promise for which billions of dollars of US taxpayer money are being sequestered? We're very fortunate to have with us somebody who has followed the topic, the subject, and the science quite deep into the rabbit hole. National correspondent for LibertyNation.com, Mr. John Klar. Thanks for being here, John.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
So, John, let's talk about electric vehicles, specifically cars, but also perhaps we could delve a little further into the trucking fleets as we go down there. Now, the big selling point of EV cars is that they're good for the environment. Is that accurate?
Well, it is not. And the argument is that EV cars use less carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases over the useful life of their operation than gas-powered cars. And that may be true. I think that itself is a dubious claim. In fact, the EPA has at its website, you can go there and it says myths about EV cars. And it says this is not true because even if you account for the carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases that are generated in the manufacture of batteries, which some have complained about, then still EV cars over their useful life use less or emit fewer greenhouse gases. They have no tailpipes, and so they're wonderful. The problem with the EPA's website is that they have excluded non-greenhouse gas emissions, many of which are toxins. Okay, carbon dioxide is called a pollution now since Al Gore came to the fore on the climate, but carbon dioxide is essential for all life, plant and animal. In fact, increased carbon dioxide levels are increasing crop yields in many parts of the world. So it's not all a bad thing, but carbon dioxide doesn't cause cancer. It's not an endocrine disruptor. It doesn't kill the microbiome of the human gut and the soil. And so if you start looking at these other chemicals, EV cars have specific aspects in manufacturing that are very different from gas-powered vehicles and generate enormous quantities of these other chemicals. And it's kind of really a blow to those who have invested not just their money, but their faith in EV cars to save us from the pollution, to find out that lithium mining is absolutely destroying the water and the soil, one of the most toxic enterprises in the world ever by human activity. And it's exploding exponentially to build batteries that create more pollution on their disposal. And we haven't even got into the rubber tire issue, which has been largely ignored as well. And it's a huge pollution problem. So I have no bone in this fight other than to try to actually reduce the toxins that will give my grandchildren cancer. And reducing carbon dioxide without regard to these ecotoxins is, I think, a farce, if not a deliberate lie.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you raise about the benefits of carbon dioxide here, because we have witnessed across the globe that there's an immense greening of the globe, which can only be good, really, because they produce air. It's almost like it's a cleaning system for the environment. And when you have massive tracts of brand new green land, trees, forests, grasslands, that can only be a net benefit to humanity. And it seems that the idea of cutting back on our carbon to such an extent where you're jeopardizing that, it seems a foolhardy venture, excuse me, at least on that level. Let's talk about the tires that you just mentioned, because this is one of the areas that hardly ever gets discussed. And I think it's possibly one of the most significant in the EV debate, isn't it, John?
Well, yeah. And if I could just address something you've mentioned there, as far as areas being greened up by increasing levels of carbon dioxide and whether or not and how much of that is attributable to human conduct.
Sure.
To say it's on net balance, I mean, that is the question. I think there are other areas where perhaps these are not helpful for our cropping and farmland. But what you've pointed out is that we only hear one side of the equation. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they only look at potential negatives, and they are a range of possibilities, not these certainties. We're told that, the ice cap's going to be gone on November 27th. I mean, it's reduced to these alarmisms that do help sell products, by the way. They help sell renewable energy products. And one of the things that's been sort of nagging at my brain as I try to think critically over the years is this rubber tire thing you mentioned. And I had seen some years ago that these cars burn 30% more in rubber. They go through tires 30% faster. That seems to be the low end. I've seen some other studies or claims that it's as much as 50%. And initially I thought, well, that's going to make them more expensive because a lot of people are looking at the cost. These are very expensive vehicles. But even if you bring these costs down, what are the environmental costs if we look past the carbon dioxide? And so I didn't even realize until some recent studies have come out that rubber pollution from tires is not just, oh, they wore out, you have to throw them in the landfills and get rid of the tires now. Farmers here in Vermont, by the way, when we had a lot of farms, they use them on their silage pits to hold the silage down for the winter. So I could always give away my tires. Just go to a farmer, they'll thank you for them. But what we find out is that the real pollution from those tires isn't when they hit the landfill, it's when they're being driven and they release particularized or particulate, I don't know what you call it, particulate matter of rubber. And now these cars, the EV cars, apparently it's because they have increased torque. That was the other reason. Like, well, why would they go through it faster? Do they turn at a different radius? Well, they have engines that can generate energy much more quickly. They go faster off the starting gate, which is creating safety issues as well because they're quiet as well, not really good for pedestrians. But this is why they burn more rubber. And this rubber is not just rubber. It has heavy metals in it. It has all kinds of petroleum byproducts in it. And it is now, according to a recent study, contributing to 6.6 million tons a year of airborne particles that we're all driving around generating. I'm not sure we want to increase that 30 to 50% overnight in our lust to stop carbon dioxide. This is not net pollution. It might be net carbon, net zero. Even if it is, I'm saying it's not net rubber. It's far more rubber. It's far more lithium. And it's now being attributed to being causing 78% of all of the microplastic pollution in our oceans from tires alone. Now, whether those numbers come into further criticism, if we're going to increase that by 30 to 50%, maybe we should have a discussion about something other than just carbon dioxide. And maybe the EPA should extend its myths about EVs to actually embrace these very real scientific concerns. This is very real environmentalism here, looking at ecotoxins and not just carbon dioxide.
Yeah, I think it's what Liberty Nation senior political analyst likes to call one-step thinking. And it's quite inherent in a certain political mindset that they have a solution that, well, here's a solution. We want to reduce the carbon footprint. Therefore, we'll go for EV cars because they don't put out all these carbon dioxide. And yet they don't consider what other toxins are being put out, nor the offset things through brake dust, through tire particulate matter. And all these things, as you say, you've got to look at it at a balance. So which one actually works out the best? And I don't think we'll come up with the definitive answer on that, but it seems to me that the shelf life of an electric vehicle is much shorter than that of a standard gas-powered car, isn't it?
Well, there's so much bad information coming down now that we've got past the first step of the sales pitch. Okay. Their resale values are terrible. A lot of people don't want them. They don't really work as well as advertised. I've heard more and more consumer reports are showing people are not happy with them. They don't charge well in the cold. They don't have potentially enough charging stations. We're told that we have, I think Bill Gates recently said that we have to triple the size of the electric grid in the country, but partly because of climate policies that have intruded upon that industry's ability to repair and maintain its grid line. We've been expanding the grid in America at the lowest rate, perhaps in our history. So there are some logistical problems here that mean that even if they do work well, and then, by the way, they end up in the landfills again, it's not just the lithium production that you have to dispose of it all. And the recycling, there are different methods for recycling. They all create more pollution. So actually, I disagree with you. I think as we apply our second step and invite people who already are to look at these things critically, that we can say unequivocally that EV cars are far more deleterious to the ecosystem than the gas-powered cars we're told they're going to replace. Just follow the money, by the way, and you could see why some people might have a little bit of a bias here. But if you just look at the lithium and the rubber alone, they are an absolute environmental nightmare, being heavily subsidized regressively on the taxpayer tab, borrowed money, and we don't have an alternate plan, and it doesn't even look like they would work. It literally looks like we cannot build out the grid. And you mentioned EV trucks. Once again, the logistics become impossible. It's one thing to dream something, it's another to build it.
Well, we'll be talking about the infrastructure in place and the infrastructure that's not in place after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.